4. First one is
going back to the Pearson specialized high school exam contract. And
we're going to ask the content experts to join us. So they're moving up to the table right now.
Absolutely.
So if you wait a second, they'll be able to hear you.
Sure.
Okay, since you can't actually see them, Isaac, I'm going to ask them to identify themselves for the record, so to speak.
Great.
Yep. So I'm Dan Park from the Office of Assessment.
Hi, Dan.
I'm Maket Moll from the Office of Policy and Evaluation.
And Leanna from the Office of Student Enrollment.
All right, Isaac, you're up.
Hey, yeah, so one of the questions that I've been thinking about and I've been hearing from others is going forward with this proposal, which has a lot of benefit to it. The idea is to bring in more diversity, and the concern or the question is, what is our policy going to be with ties? There's a possibility, and it is a speculation, that we may get more tie scores because there are more students that might find themselves wanting to take the test. And what would we do about that? Do we have a plan in place for that?
So we won't make any changes to how we deal with ties. Every student that scores at the same cutoff, at the same score, has the same offers eligible to them on the SHSAT, and that won't change. So we.
Hi, this is Laura. I'm joining the conference.
Hi, Laura. It's Ray. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, and we can hear you too. David just went through, if I could just catch you up a second, David just went through the items, and Isaac has just asked about the specialized high school exam item on the agenda. And we have with us the content experts at the table, and Isaac's question with ties. And the content experts were just explaining.
I'm sorry, it's a little tinny. Isaac's question had to do with
ties. Like tie goes to the runner.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay, so if multiple kids get the same score and rank the same school?
That's correct. So
okay.
And so we're going to now go back to the answer, if that's okay. Yeah, okay.
Great. So yeah, there'll be no change in how we deal with that. Any student that score, all students that score at the same score are eligible for the same schools. We work with the schools to determine their capacity, and we set the score breaks either right above or below each score, depending on how many students we're getting at that score.
Okay, so that's low impact. I guess the concern I have is if we have a drastic, and maybe this won't happen, if we have a drastic increase in ties, would we be able to absorb that? Or if we may find ourselves, I don't know, needing to find another process. So, just a thought.
Anticipate major changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we anticipate any changes to how this will work.
Okay.
If I can just follow up on that, I think because I've been getting sort of questions about that too, and I think some of the concerns, and we've discussed this until I'll sort of state what you said today to us, and you can sort of correct me and build on that. The concern is when they see Common Core lying in people's opinions of the sort of state exams, and your assurances is that Common Core aligned is just so that they're not testing on anything that 7th graders are not tested on, and that's always been sort of the goal of the specialized high school exam. But the complexity of this will remain the same, that actually there really won't be any substantive changes to the math side of it, and in the reading side, the complexity of the reading comprehension will remain the same. It will remain the same as in prior SHSAT tests, and the core difference that I guess we have to see is the new sort of writing section, and it's not writing as an essay. It'll be all objective sort of multiple choice, or there'll be a correct answer. But which will replace the scrambled paragraph logical reasoning. But the concern is that if you make it easier, this might be this bubble of kids qualifying, so it's not that you're making it easier to increase access, or at least maybe entertain the idea that there were things structural in the prior one that may have declined access to kids who could thrive. But the goal is not to make it easier. It's just the logical reasoning and scrambled paragraphs are not anything any kid learns in a middle school curriculum. It's only something you learn and you learn well if you take a prep course, although anyone could read the books and learn it, but they may not learn it as well as if you're having a prep course or something. Is that more or less accurate, that the less complexity of the reading and the math will remain the same as in prior?
So I think you did a great job summarizing a lot of what our prior conversations were. I think you're accurate in that the goal is not to make the test easier, but I think the goal is to make the test fair for all students, and that is accomplished by ensuring that the content that is on the test is aligned to the New York State learning standards and the curriculum that students are exposed to in the course of expected instruction in grades through grades 7 and 8 respectively for the exam that they're taking. You're also correct in that the math section of it is not going to substantially change. I think where we'd like to highlight is that on the English language arts sections, we do think that the test is increasing in rigor despite the changes to the test. I think you're equating the alignment to the Common Core learning standards as making the test easier. I want to reiterate that the state test is designed to measure proficiency of the learning standards, and we recognize that the goal of the specialized high school admissions test is to be able to identify and differentiate among some of our highest achieving students.
So actually, I think it's what I'm hearing when people hear Common Core aligned. I'm not saying that. So it's just that their experience with Common Core is what the kids are taught, but also like what they're tested on in the state exam. So to hear in the context of an exam, their only experience is the state exam. So, and my concern was, and I had expressed it a couple of times in our initial conversation, was that is this just going to be a repackaging of the state exam, because that's not acceptable. But I also think so the concern was when they heard that it's going to be a state exam, which may not actually be easy for a lot of kids anyway, but that if that was the case, there might be an explosion or of kids who are, doing better and getting higher grade points on it, and because you're making it easier. So that was the concern. Not that it's just that people heard Common Core and they assumed it's going to be just a replication of the state exam. And so, but you're saying that's not the case. It's just not testing something that the Common Core doesn't require kids to have learned by the end of 7th grade.
Correct.
But it'll test it at a much higher level, whatever skill set, than the state exam.
Yeah, we think, increasing the complexity, the text complexity of the reading passages that students are exposed to, changing the types of questions rather than pure kind of identification of what students have read and being able to respond to those questions, but asking them to analyze and synthesize the information that they've read through in the reading passages, also add to the rigor of the exam. So I think that those are ways in which we can ensure that the questions and the content are Common Core aligned, but are not a replica of the state test. So we do, we do want to make sure that comes across. It is not a repeat of the New York State test. They're designed for different purposes.
I mean, are the reading comprehension questions, I mean, other than including literary text, will they be substantively different in the kinds of questions or passages being selected? I know you'll include literary text. Again, these are just questions that I've had, and also questions that people have been asking me, and so, better to, share it all now.
Yeah, I think they're fair questions. So, as you said, in addition to adding the different types of reading passages, which, as you alluded to, we've shared kind of the inclusion of different passages that fall under the literary kind of component rather than pure informational reading passages that have historically been on the SHSAT. So whether it's kind of stories, poems, drama type literary passages, but again, as I said, kind of changing the types of questions that we're asking students to do after reading those passages is also a change. So rather than just identifying what is the main idea of the reading passage, which is a common question on the state test, asking them to take these passages and be able to synthesize the information that's shared and answer different questions on it also adds to the rigor of the questions being asked.
But that's always been on the specialized, that's always been the level. That the specialized high school reading comp was never like a what's the main idea kind of question. It was always inference questions.
But there are different levels of inference questions and an ability to increase the rigor of those questions. So in addition to kind of asking what we believe are more rigorous questions, both in relation to the state exam and prior SHSAT exams, other changes can also increase the rigor of the questions that are being asked. So for example, the change from 5 multiple choice response options to 4 is another way to kind of increase the rigor of the questions that are being asked. Multiple select questions. So choose all of the right answers out of what is listed rather than one and only correct answer, right? So there's still be a way to kind of change the rigor of what is being asked in addition to keeping reading comprehension as a core of the English language arts component.
And what quality control will be in place? I mean, there has been sort of a record, well, Pearson has been doing the specialized high school exam, so people who don't want changes, in some ways it makes sense that they're better suited to make an incremental change. I mean, but on the other hand, Pearson has a record of sometimes in these kinds of questions having a sort of ambiguous, people would, very bright people would argue what's the right answer, and so like what are all the right answers? I mean, what's the quality control in making sure that what actually goes before the kids, there is no, bad questions or, I mean, because this is a very high stakes test. You're one shot, you get in, and it's not something where you look at kids moving over time. And so certainly in the first 2 years of rolling out maybe slightly different style questions, or at least some, where would the quality control be beyond, where would, like, will you have an opportunity to review questions, and if not, post, and like Vito said, you just can't give this. This is not, even if you can't then propose a different question or something. Is there any sort of built-in quality control for this?
Yeah, so I think there are multiple quality control steps built in along the process. So those kind of exist in the current process for developing the specialized high school admissions test, as well as will continue in the future. So it's the test development process is a pretty lengthy and time-consuming process that involves both kind of content and subject matter experts from Pearson, as well as from the DOE side, are heavily involved in the process. So Pearson develops the questions, goes through a lengthy editorial and bias review process. Those questions are tried out, and based off of the data from the tryout, a pool of items that meet the specifications, both in kind of rigor in terms of difficulty, as well as kind of the breadth of content that we want to cover, are then ultimately shared with the Department of Ed, and there's a back and forth process with our content experts here within the Office of Assessment and Pearson's team before a final test form or test forms are ultimately created and put in front of students. So that process has been successful in the past. We have had a very positive relationship with Pearson in the development of a specialized high school admissions test, and don't expect that kind of rigorous QA process to change moving forward.
Okay, I have a couple others, but I don't know who else is actually present on the committee.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, Laura. It's right. Elzora is here with us at the museum, and Isaac and Gary are on the line.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Gary, did you have a question? I felt like you had a question. Or was it Isaac? Was it you?
Yeah, I had one more I wanted to bring in there, and it had to do with the impression that I had, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but we would have a lot more ELA because we're going Common Core ELA aligned. What do we do about students who, I know some who have difficulty, putting their thoughts down in writing, and how do we accommodate? I mean, this isn't something maybe we're going to answer today, but I guess I just wanted to raise that as an issue. Obviously, we want to be as inclusive as possible in this process. So that was a question.
Yeah, thank you.
Probably.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I'll try to address a few of your points. So one is just on the very first point, while there are changes to the ELA test happening, do want to emphasize that the test will remain a mixture of math and ELA items. So we're not increasing the proportion of ELA items via the decreasing proportion of math items. So just wanted to make sure that we're clear about that. So both pieces will remain a very substantive part of the test. In terms of concerns for students, so I think one thing just want to highlight, there are now items that will relate to written language standards. We won't be asking students to write essays or short answers on the test, like all the test questions will remain multiple choice, or with the inclusion of a handful of multiple select items as well. So just want to make sure we emphasize that piece. And I think the other piece we just want to emphasize is, though, as Niket mentioned, there will be some increase in the text complexity on the ELA side. The purpose of the exam is both to help differentiate students at the highest levels of performance and also ensure that we are identifying students who have who have the potential to be successful at these schools. So by differentiating at that high level of performance, we are aiming to meet those twin objectives of the assessment.
I understand.
And I have a question on the field testing component. This is actually, after our conversations, my one lingering big concern is that, field testing, there will be questions that won't count. This will be the first time that field testing will be introduced into the specialized high school exam. That you've done, there's always been field testing, but not by embedding field questions into the actual exam. Since this is a one and done thing, and the stakes are not just to get in and not get in, but get into the schools that you prefer among the ranking, and it's not something, and it's a time test that, to the extent there are questions that may end up proving that kids will have to answer, that may end up proving to not be good questions and not using, and maybe happen that kids could, it's a very high anxiety test. I wish you could ratchet down the pressure, but there's no way to do it. Most of my kids took it. You just, you've got 2.5 hours or maybe now 3 hours to get into the school based on the exam. And that if a kid gets stumped on a question that's a field question because it's either not a very good one and they waste too much time, or it happens to be one one particular skill that they're not good at, and so then they've actually, being over-tested in a skill, it skews it. And seeing as we're introducing a lot of other changes, it's not a complete overhaul, but there will be some significant changes to then throw in field testing into the mix on top of that in the first couple of years to see if the new design is actually something that is worth keeping or worth following through on. I'm concerned for that, even more so than in the state exams. I'm not a big fan of it in general, but I feel like this can really impact, a student's performance on the exam.
Yep, so a couple of thoughts on that, also a good question. So one, want to first just kind of reiterate the purpose of the embedding the field test items, which is one, to ensure that we are getting the best data from the most representative sample to inform creation of the most high quality tests in future years. So,
oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. You came in and out of,
Yeah, no problem, I will repeat.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So first, it's a great question. Just want to reiterate first the purpose of the embedding of the field test items. So embedding a small number of field test items on the test helps ensure that we are getting the best data from the most representative sample from those tryout items to ensure that we're creating the highest quality test in the future. So just want to first reground in that. I think the other thing just want to note was that before each of the specialized high school admissions tests are administered, in the prior spring, we produced a handbook that is distributed out to all the schools and students. That includes guidance on preparing and getting ready to take the test. One thing that is noted, and we try to reiterate, is that students should work at a decent pace throughout the entire test and not get bogged down by a single item. So whether that is an actual scored operational test item, or in the future, whether it's an embedded field test item, one thing we'd want to make sure we deliver in those messages that students are internalizing that guidance around how to best prepare and take the test when you're sitting for that. So I think the communication around not getting bogged down in any single item will help mitigate against some of those concerns.
Laura, are you good with that answer? Were you able to hear it?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear
Hello?
you. Hi, Laura.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
You didn't hear me before. I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I certainly understand. I mean, that's part of the testing prep and everything, but keep in mind that, I mean, and I know kids read it, but we also know that, the sort of the skill of not panicking and pacing, is actually, some kids may be more adept at it than others. And the more practice you have, I mean, I actually think it's silly I actually advise people that it's always good to prep some. The process of prepping, it gives you an idea if you might be a candidate for it and that your ability to step it up. But I am concerned that at least in the first couple of years, without knowing how the quality of the changes are impacting, and kids' response, to then throw in this other thing of questions that may actually not be good questions or on target, and that throwing that in and the kids not knowing which one, I think it's unreasonable to expect that even kids who know that they're supposed to pace them, and that's a skill in itself, that the more kids prep in pacing and taking many practice exams, and ideally you don't want a kid who actually can do well on it but maybe didn't take as many practice exams to panic. I'm just concerned that that's just throwing in too many variables into the change. I'm not opposed to rethinking the test. We haven't rewritten it in a very long time. I mean, we're actually not doing a complete overhaul anyway, but I'm just concerned that that is just throwing in one too many variables, at least in the first year or two of it. Just sort of, sort of human nature, personal experience. I just don't think having questions, having, instructions that you should pace and not spend too much time on any one question is, going to help if kids are stumbling on questions that ultimately prove to not be well worded or good questions that are going to be thrown out. Anyway, that's,
Laura,
we can discuss more after.
I think we all share that view as well. Gary, Isaac, did you guys have anything more?
Good here.
Okay, Gary? Okay, Gary's giving me the thumbs up. Laura, did you have other questions?
I know no, I think at this point, I just wanted to, some of these were also to clarify so anyone who's listening, hopefully, understands what some of the things are. And one last one, if you can articulate why you thought logic, reasoning, and the specific scrambled paragraphs have missed the mark in the English section, because that is the one other thing that I'm getting, and I certainly have my take on it, but why you feel that missed the mark and just replacing it, other than it aligns more to Common Core, it does never align to any New York State standard anyway. So those were never in alignment, so why remove something that was never aligned to any standard, but it's been in there for a long time? What's the thinking now is the time to remove it?
I'm going to let the content experts, not the CFO, answer that. If that's okay, Laura. Okay.
Sure. I think I think kind of just concisely here. I think simply because it was never aligned isn't the best reason to continue the process. We want to make sure that the test is representative of the expectations that all students have, and going through a rigorous kind of curriculum in their middle school, elementary and middle schools, as they prepare for this exam or any other exam, right? And so the fact that these particular items were not familiar to a majority of students or many students, unless they engaged in test prep, whether or not we feel that test prep is valuable or not, right? Like, I think we can agree that being familiar with the exam is always going to be helpful in some capacity, and so we want to make sure that the test that we're providing provides not just equal access and opportunity to sit for the exam, but also to be exposed to the types of content that students would see on the exam.
Okay, thank you.
Elzora?
I have no questions, thank you.
I feel like since Elzora's sitting next to me, if she had a question, she'd just poke me.
Absolutely.
I keep forgetting to ask her if she had one now, so. Anyway.
I know I've been the most vocal on this, but some of it is also so that if anyone's listening or for the record, it's important, but and also because that they're genuine questions I have.
Oh,
but thank you. I think you've at this point, on and off the record, you have answered, you've stated your position.
Super. Okay, great. Michelle, do you want to now
take it away with resolution?
Thanks, guys. I'm going to send the content experts home. Do you guys have any other questions, or should we move on to grouping the items for voting?